So earlier when we had launched USDO, BUSD liquidity, we were on Pancake, and the Pancake bonding curve is quite steep. Now, if you think this is the total liquidity, then let's say this is where we are. Then, in order to be on the peg, we have to be within this range. Anything beyond this and beyond this, which means that you're out of peg. Now, as some people might have noticed, this looks a little bit like a mountain or a hillock. So what we need to do is we need to change this mountain to a little bit of a tabletop mountain. Okay, so we launched OmniTrade. So if this was the Pancake liquidity, then what we have now is something like this. Okay, so the first version of OmniTrade, we actually are already on the second iteration of OmniTrade. The first version of OmniTrade, instead of only allowing this much region which trades at parity, we now have more or less this much region, which means that there is a wider range. Capital is being used more efficiently. Beyond this, of course, the peg still collapses, but at least you have significantly more capital efficiency, which means that for the same amount of LP capital, USDO will trade 1:1 with BUSD. This is actually based upon a beta factor of 0.5. In very simple language, what it means is half of the capital range will still be used at parity. Now, what we have done only today morning is we have pushed up this beta to 0.7, which means that the capital efficiency will go even higher, which means that effectively, if this was Pancake and this was the first iteration of OmniTrade, we now have a slightly more efficient OmniTrade, which goes something like this. Okay, which means that instead of only having this much, or first version PCS was this, OmniTrade first iteration was this, the new one is even more. Okay, so which means that the peg stays at 1 for longer, which means our main objective, which is USD equal to $1, is being achieved. Since yesterday, we are already seeing USDO trading at parity. Now, sure, all of this helps, but what we really need to do is we need to not only have this, but we need to turn it into a much wider thing. So what that effectively means is we need to also increase the amount of LP capital deployed, which means that people can transact $10,000, $100,000 of USDO, or even $1 million of USDO at one shot, and they should be able to safely go to some other stable. So ideally, this should be at least 1 million BUSD, 1 million USDO. So that's our target, which means that at any point in time, several $100,000 should be able to convert it from USDO to BUSD without the price getting impacted. Now, obviously, depending upon the demand and supply of the USDO in the pool, ideally it has to be 50% USDO and 50% BUSD. Now, depending upon the demand and supply, it might be a little bit more USDO or it might be a little bit more BUSD. Now, it doesn't matter as long as it is within the parity range, it's kind of okay. But obviously what's going to happen is, let's say this leads to more USDO and this is the BUSD portion. What's going to happen is, because we are a new stable coin, people are going to dump USDO on us, and this will steadily start moving here, 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 till it start eventually topples over. Now, we want to obviously avoid this situation. Now, the other thing is, anytime liquidity is added, it will basically add, let's say the peg was over, the ratios were over here. Okay, so only this much amount of BUSD was there and this much amount of USD was there. So when somebody adds new LP, it will effectively ask them to, let's say this was 20% BUSD and 80% USDO. If you added $100 worth of value, it will force you to add 80 USDO and it will force you to add 20 BUSD. Whereas what we really want is we want people to supply more BUSD, but the contracts don't work like that. Contracts basically only allow you to add liquidity based upon whatever the current ratios are. But there is a small trick we can use. We can actually force people to do what is called single-sided liquidity addition only, which means that let's say this is the curve and we are sitting here. Okay, let's say 20 and 80. Okay, this is BUSD and this is USDO. We can actually force people, let's say there is 100. Let's say people want to add 100 BUSD, $100 worth of value. We can actually force them to add only BUSD. What it will do is it will sell portion of the BUSD for USDO. Effectively what it does is it forces people to sell push this thing towards here. So by adding BUSD over here, it effectively buys, pushes this thing a little bit over here, and then it adds the liquidity in favor of getting more BUSD in the pool. So if people are selling BUSD, then what will happen is there will be more BUSD over here. This will steadily move in this direction. And our objective is really to get it somewhere 50-50, or even like ideally there should be more BUSD so that people can keep dumping on it, and that would be better. But by forcing people to do single-sided liquidity only, that sort of gets the pool in sync. Now, obviously there is a concern over here that when you remove liquidity, it will basically split it based upon whatever the current ratios are. So for example, if you added single-sided and the pool was over here, when you remove, you will get this much BUSD and this much USDO. And yeah, that is potentially a concern, but as long as USDO stays at a peg, it should not be a big problem, because then there is no impermanent loss. In fact, you are probably making fees. Now, even then, there is some risks for people. So why would somebody add liquidity? Why would somebody deploy BUSD LP in a single-sided manner? And the answer is they get LP incentives. We have farms, which means people can stake their LP and earn rewards. Now, where do these rewards come from? They come from partner projects who want to use their project tokens as collateral and mint USDO. And why would partner projects provide incentives? And the answer is, as long as USDO is at $1, which means that they can effectively borrow against their treasury, and their project token holders can borrow against their tokens. Which means that there is a reason for people to not sell them if they needed cash. And that's a win-win for the project partner as well as us, which means it effectively leads to a virtuous circle where partners provide incentives because the peg is at $1, and because of the incentives, more people are rewarded to help the peg stay at $1, which in turn sort of leads to a growing liquidity loop, which should eventually lead to a takeoff point, at which point we will progressively not even need incentives, or we'll start charging significantly higher incentives to project partners. So things are on track. We are working on it. We'll keep you posted. Thank you. Bye.